Cheat Sheet Mark 5. By Roage. Forward. The cheat sheet is a lawful mechanism that has the potential of allowing the reader to grasp and reveal the holy grail of Arthurian legend. The document itself has taken 10 years to develop on its own and evolves as new things come to light. Although the holy grail itself is surprisingly simple, it is hidden from our perception. When one tries to share the knowledge, the recipient must overcome their own self-imposed obstacles and the pre-programmed internal resistance to the information. It took exactly 30 years from the time I was 12 years old, 1976 to 2006, and began searching for it until I untangled myself enough to finally grasp it. During that period, although I did not know it at the time, my entire life, all I experienced and everything I had, was devoted to that objective. Much of the way, I was dragged through it kicking and screaming. In this document, I will first attempt to sweep away most of the obstacles and barriers to understanding, reveal the prerequisites to understanding and reveal what the Holy Grail is, how it works and how to put this mechanism in force in one's life. This and prior iterations of the cheat sheet do work and have allowed many people to untangle the mystery. One cannot even get this far without being ready on an unconscious level. The reader is not here by accident. This is not something that one can skip to the end and make sense of. Doing that has never worked. Not one single time. The Holy Grail is meaningless, unbelievable and confusing until a proper foundation is established. It may take multiple readings and direct reinforcement through one's life experience. How long will it take? That depends entirely on the reader, and one will have the best chance at getting it if one follows the directions. Wishing the reader good luck is hilarious to all those who have figured this out. Roage. First things first. One must realize how limited spoken and written language is when relating concepts that people have had no experience with throughout their entire lives. The cheat sheet Mark 5 is much more powerful if you read it out loud to yourself than simply reading it silently or even listening to it being read to you. Why? The sounds the words make, and what they provoke within you, are far more powerful than the definition of the words. The left brain or ego communicates with written and spoken language. The right brain or our true self communicates using symbols and the events that occur in our reality. Worse yet, the left brain, ego, alone does not have the sensory capacity to detect or measure the self and is completely blind to the self. The ego must rely on its interpretation of its feelings and the reason for thoughts and events that occur in its environment to know what the self is attempting to communicate. Those attempts at communicating are initially recognized by ego as synchronicities or coincidences. One must accept that the self is indeed attempting to establish that communication. I will now reveal the limitation of spoken or written words. When I say tree, you think back to all the times you had direct experience with tree, and through your direct experience, you then know the meaning of tree. When you were a child, you did not know the meaning of tree, so you asked someone who knew the meaning of tree. Then when you saw, felt and smelled a tree, you then knew what tree meant. Obstacle 1. If I write or say torg, a word you do not either know the definition or the meaning of, then it is unknown to you. If I define torg as like a basketball that is pink and fuzzy, then all you have is a basketball that is pink and fuzzy. I defined it as being like a basketball that is pink and fuzzy, but until you hold one in your hand, it will forever mean to you as being a pink and fuzzy basketball. Correcting that gap in meaning is easy because I need only put a torg in your hand and now you can know the meaning of torg. Obstacle 2. Abstracts like emotion cannot be conveyed using a physical example. Words like love, celebration and worry mean different things to different people based on how they experienced those concepts in their personal experience. If I use the words the holidays expecting everyone to know that I am referring Hanukkah and New Year's Day, then the holidays are not useful to convey the meaning intended. As we all have different experiences with all words, then the words themselves often lead to misunderstanding because the uniqueness of our experience causes us to have subtle different meanings for each of us. I cannot assume May Day to mean a positive thing for the reader or listener by itself. Here is the challenge. Not only do folks have little or no knowledge of what is being conveyed, but it is not tangible, nor are there simple words that allow people to relate to their pre-existing experience. This means that one needs to be mindful of the limitation of the use of language here and apply an effort to grasp the meaning behind the words, because they can at most hint at the true meaning. So please help in that and refrain from being distracted by what is said and focus on what the words provoke in you. If the words lead to negative feelings, then the words were not received or were too limited to easily convey what is meant. Please use that as a guide, because if one derives negative feelings, then one is not grasping the right meaning. It will take more attention and self-reflection to notice when that occurs. It is suggested that one merely let the negative feeling pass and continue or attempt at going over the words until the intended positive outcome is perceived. The cheat sheet mark 5 attempts to convey the meaning of an abstract that many have no useful experience with, as we do not yet have the skills to appreciate it. In the attempts to reveal tools, one can gain direct personal knowledge. The intent is to use a bad tool, language, to build a work of art in spite of that bad tool's woeful inadequacies. Reading the cheat sheet out loud can help do precisely that. Introduction. I am Roage, and I am a being that is wearing a flesh suit just like you. Like most, I saw life as an unfair enigma beyond my capacity to comprehend. My life was a futility of simply hitting my head against a brick wall. I literally thought I was in hell, at the mercy of unconscious demons in a continual state of confusion, hate, misery, disease, and death. I was around 12 years old when I decided the world was a cage filled with illogical animals. It was a miserable time and all I wanted was out. For some strange reason, I did not think suicide was a solution to my problems, as I had a feeling that I would end up right back in this trap. I still thought there might be a being that men called God, so I asked in complete hopelessness and despair for the keys out of hell, and I would do anything to get out. It took 30 years for it to come to pass. It took all I had to figure it out, and the funny thing was that it was so easy and it was there all the time right in front of me. The reason it took so long is that I did not have the perceptual capacity or the cognitive ability to accept or understand it. Even funnier is during that 30 years I was being taught lessons that would expand my perception, provide the cognitive ability, and all that while I had concluded that I was just a loser plagued with bad luck and simply damned. When I started out, I was given the proper tools for the task. To an extreme, I was narcissistic, unsympathetic, malicious, amoral, dishonest, intelligent, curious, detail-oriented, observant, systematic, and skeptical. I had no respect for authority, and thankfully, I had a healthy sense of humor, and boy did I ever need that. Basically, I was a sociopath. After an intense education in science, and later, religion and some philosophy, I concluded that if these institutions knew the way out, then they are either not telling or confused. Either way, I would not be where I was if it actually worked. I held everything that I was told as either a deliberate lie or suspect. I concluded that I would only believe what I could demonstrate and prove to myself. Initially, I knew little, and it showed. I did not fit in and had no patience for people. To me, they were objects, simply subjects of my experimentation. I rejected standard model cosmology and saw fudge factors in physics as a product of intellectual laziness. I rejected my own base assumptions. I did, however, see irony and coincidence as instructive and something to observe closely. Every time I hit a barrier, I started over, accepting only what made sense and what was demonstrated directly to me. It took a while. I became alienated from my friends, family, and society. Slowly I put together a framework that I tested and tested over and over in my life experience. Most thought I was nuts. I was nuts, that is, until 4:44 a.m. July 4, 2006. An event occurred that resulted from a 7-year study of the law. Not what lawyers practice, but natural law. Natural law has a real potency, like fire burns and things fall down when dropped. To me, procedural law was gibberish. I rejected the theory of legal positivism as something only idiots would buy into. With that event I experienced for the first time, no worry, no fear. I enjoyed peace, love, and most importantly, clarity. I discovered after learning the natural law that the universe is a friendly place. I gained a new ability that allowed me to perceive things in a new way that did not require my five senses. I learned to perceive that nature has an intelligence and timing. Nature is that which all power is manifest in the universe, and it is vital to know how it works, or one cannot know why things occur. This ignorance of natural law is the reason we often attribute events in our life to happenstance, luck, probability, and chaos. When one studies the natural law, to the extent that I have, then it was automatic that I would encounter the source of the boundaries and architecture that I experienced in this thing that I called my life. So profound was this event that it changed me forever and made me free and happy. More importantly, I found my connection to nature, who I was, and more importantly my purpose. It required a search not outside but inside. How could I become happy if I did not accept the truth that I was not happy? It was when I stopped deluding myself. I was so excited I began telling people about how I got to this point. If they thought I was nuts before, they were sure now. I could not simply tell people. It took years of study to find out why. The journey itself revealed much about how I was and why it took me so long to get to this point. I began documenting what was required. I wrote articles, stories, and parables. It seemed that no matter how persuasive or logical, I noticed that if one was not ready, then they had no chance of getting it. I identified that it was fear that kept people from listening and making sense of what I said. I put up a website and a forum and began coaching people that were in the proper state of readiness. I studied what worked and what did not. The reason you are here right now is that you have taken the first crucial step. You have decided that you are not happy and your life is not what you want, and simply asked, why? The answer will require you to listen with a completely open mind and trust yourself at a level you have not done before. What you will hear may seem stupid, crazy, and wrong. We avoid this because we are afraid that we, and often others, will think we are insane. The joke is that the inability to accept what is about to be presented will prevent you from remedying your insanity. Before one can ever hope to become sane or unconfused, you need to first suspect you are confused or insane. Until you have the courage to do that, then you will close yourself off to the cure. If you feel lost, confused, or nuts, then you are right where you need to be. The truly insane deny it and have deluded themselves into thinking they are not insane. This is the fifth iteration of the cheat sheet. It has been developed over 12 years, incorporating observations over a lifetime and revisions to make it useful for you. It has been described as the fast way to enlightenment. It is not that it is difficult, but the primary problem is that it is easy. S&D we need a large amount of context in order to go through with it. Think of it like jumping off a cliff. All that is required is simply to relax and fall forward, but managing the fear is the hurdle. It will require you to put aside what you think you know about life and to truly have an open mind. Those who have truly tried and used this methodology have been completely changed. They cannot describe the difference, but they do not want to go back to the way they were. Here are some things to really ponder before you begin, so be honest with yourself and take some time. Are you happy? Would you rather be right than happy? If you could have it changed for you, would you? What if it is not a matter of your logic being wrong, but rather, your conclusions were based on not being able to completely observe what has happened to you in your life? Life does not contain a lesson. Life is the lesson. Even if you don't now believe it, just pretend to look at your life as an interactive lesson used to bring you to this point in time right now. Soon you will find yourself not pretending. Enjoy. A new symbol, on. I will speak on, or on, to indicate the circle with a vertical slash shown above when reading, just to make it easier. On is the set theory representation of empty set, or null set, and is sometimes represented using empty curly braces. In the set of complete human thought and language, there does not exist a singular term to properly represent the non-entity that is naturally supreme and in authority in the universe and outside of the universe. The symbol on is not an image of this non-entity. This symbol is a placeholder for that which has no placeholder. The symbol describes all that the non-entity is not. Specific terms tend to create an automatic block to understanding for many people. People often become lost in an argument over religion or semantics. This is one reason for employing a converse symbol. In addition, it is a fact that on is largely misunderstood and ignorantly blamed for a host of human suffering, frustration, and depravity. It is required as you are living and you require something to grasp onto, as nothing is elusive. It could also be looked at as a black hole. On is the truth you seek. An overview of the Holy Grail attainment process. The two main keys to reality are easy. 1. Relax and enjoy the show. 2. Holy Grail, I will trust you, the supreme authority under which our corporeal existence is governed, on, without condition, if you remove from me my ability to create a victim. Sounds simple on its face, doesn't it? However, knowing why it works requires one to rethink nearly every assumption that we were taught about reality. To achieve that requires a new set of tools, or more accurately, remembering how to use the tools we were given as young children before we chose to wander down a confusing path, and they are: 1. Maintaining the focus of our attention to the immediate moment, now. 2. Know how that attention to the immediate moment is required to comport ourselves responsibly. 3. Knowing why responsibility reduces the suffering in our experience. 4. Knowing how irresponsibility deprives us of power, abilities, and rewards. 5. Accepting how mastering our knowledge of natural/divine law and its application in our lives are a requirement to comporting oneself responsibly. 6. Knowing how responsibility and natural/divine law are vital to regaining sanity, competence, and overcoming confusion. 7. Mastering knowledge and responsibility is the key to the successful exercise of our rights. 8. Knowing how the alignment of our words and actions with natural/divine law, through the exercise of rights, leads to positive consequences and the manifestation of power in reality. 9. Knowing that the exercise of rights ensures the protection of rights of all of us on this planet. 10. Realizing the vital need for the protection of rights of all on this planet is the most important objective that we all now face in our reality. In addition to these key elements are implementing new ways of realizing and equating oneself with the eternal being or consciousness that dwell inside our flesh body, wandering around our reality by 1. Accepting that at the core of our being is a teacher that uses our reality to provide us with the lessons we have come here to learn. 2. Accepting the learning process and how we learn our lessons. 3. Establishing and overcoming the barriers to establishing the means of reconnecting and communicating with the eternal teaching being that we are. The list seems like a lot, but it is all within you, and it is revealed through one's trust in the teacher within. On. A little on process for truth/on seekers. My best advice is to relax. You are already in the process. Actually, you always have been in the process. This is the first thing you might want to look at as the immediate life lesson. It is only a feeling that there are others that know something you don't. You know all of this already. It just was not needed to be in your conscious awareness until now. It will require a nuanced approach for you to allow yourself to see on. It does not help to try to seek or look for on is already here. One cannot see what cannot be seen. I will try a different approach and perhaps you can see what I am driving at. I am pointing to the moon. Don't be distracted by the finger. It is like having a word at the tip of your tongue. The harder you try to remember, the more you clog your process and the more it eludes you. Then when you are relaxed at 3:00 a.m., it comes to you automatically. This is because the memory server backlog has been allowed to clear. Because these things talked about here are so nuanced you cannot go at them directly. The reason is ego. I will go into this later. Is moving the blind in the same place your eyes look. That is its function. On will come on its own. I know it will. Otherwise, you would not be here right now. What works is this. 1. Trust that you are getting, right now, what you need the most. We already know what you want. The problem is ego does too, and it creates suffering, by holding what you want back. That which you want the most is held away, and that which makes you uncomfortable is visited on you. The emotional energy or concentration you apply creates an imbalance, and the reaction is always in opposition. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is true in emotion also. All emotion is ego. Yes, even feeling love. 2. Pay attention to what you experience and take it seriously. Nothing is unimportant. On cuts you some slack starting out and does not teach two things at one time. Although my lessons are complex, they are one at a time. Yes, I am in the process too, and I do this eternally just like you. What you are experiencing right now is the lesson. 3. Accept that what you are now experiencing is necessary to the lesson. The truth only applies to you, and only right now. Get comfortable with the fact that truth is non-transferable. What is the truth now can change in the next moment. Accept what you are shown and be intuitively honest. The more you accept, the higher your trust, the faster you will get what you are being taught. 4. Be mindful of the loops and the redundancy. You will repeat the same lesson with different scenarios and different people until you get it. Pay attention to what is the same through each iteration, and it will point to the objective. Then you will see the lesson displayed right before you. This is usually accompanied with a laugh and a duh. 5. Initially, you are being taught how you are being taught and not what you seek. That comes when you get the learning process down and you trust your experience and become more comfortable with how it works. Then you relax and the prerequisite lessons pass by faster and faster. Then when the time is right for you, on is visited on you because you have simply cleared away the perceptual barriers and it will seem as though on was always right there in front of you all the time. We are here to learn, and it is no surprise to ancient people that we are here going through what we are going through. Consciousness, you, me, everybody, is testing things through experience. It is one thing to know and quite another to experience it firsthand. We exist in a reduced energy state where the host-parasite/master-slave/creditor-debtor paradigm is being explored. The best way to learn that slavery is not a good idea is to experience what it is like to be a slave. We are also exploring confusion and insanity and learning how to return from a state of insanity or confusion. The following is a nuance of confusion and its fundamental characteristic. The confused are the last to know they are confused. If they did know they were confused, they would immediately work to remedy it. That is another nuance. Confusion cannot be remedied through working or effort. The main method is to stop and allow it to be fixed automatically. Stop thinking and allow your mind to change. That is not as easy as you think it is. Responsibility. It should come as no surprise that our knowledge of the mechanics of responsibility and accountability are incomplete. Those with the knowledge exploit those without that knowledge. One must know that responsibility cannot come unless one diligently maintains focused attention on the immediate moment or the right now. Both the unknown hypothetical future and the filtered and conditioned memory we call past are exclusively the realm of ego. Self as truth exists only right now and cannot be realized in either the future or past and, therefore, all true power is accessed there. If one merely maintains focus on the immediate moment without distraction, that alone provides great comfort. We are often distracted from the now and worse respond to things that might happen or in ways that worked in the past but not as they need to be responded to right now. We can be hit by the bus right now by simply being distracted by our fear of being hit by a bus in the future, or just because we were standing out of the way of the bus in the past, does not mean we are standing out of the way of the bus right now. Choosing to respond or not respond based on an acute observation and the focus of our attention on the now ensures the best approach to responding correctly. Knowing natural/divine law helps in its application to ensure one avoids unwanted consequences, as the law is consistently flawless with observable cause and effect relationship in reality, provided one has sufficient mastery of lawful principle. Example: if I hold a rock in my hand and I let it go, we are reasonably certain that the rock will fall. That is not predicting the future but merely having sufficient knowledge of how the law of gravity works as we apply it to that situation. Being conscious of the effect our responses have with respect to others by ensuring we do what is right, by not infringing against their will, is considered responsible and competent conduct. Also, we must know that we have a duty to care properly for those around us who are not responsible. If a toddler, is sitting alone on the shoulder of a busy highway and you do nothing, then you are responsible when they are hurt. Many around us are in the position of the toddler and we must take care that they are protected from their own incompetence. Suppose we have a trust fund or an inheritance waiting for us. It cannot be given to us if we are not competent or responsible to properly manage the trust. We must demonstrate that competence before we can receive what is ours. Accountability is accepting the consequence, either positive or negative, when we act in response to what occurs right now. If one is not accountable, then one cannot hope to further exercise rights, as that lack of responsibility is inherent in the nature of exercising rights, as it is not a right at all, but rather, an error that led to an infringement of the rights of another. Trust. One must trust the self, and that trust must be at a high level, usually beyond what we are comfortable with. If we do not at the moment possess the level of trust required for the contract to be accepted, our willingness to enter into the contract will spawn what I call trust builder exercises. These are events in one's life experience that force one to place a higher trust in oneself by removing the ego's ability to know the consequences of a choice they are required to make. If one refuses to make the choice, then it becomes incrementally a harder choice to make. Failing to navigate these exercises ensure that the contract will not be accepted. This is where the help of others can be an invaluable aid to see past ego's blindness. It won't provide an answer to the choice, but it can increase one's confidence in the process. It is also useful to establish a series of personal signs that self can use to indicate the progress through an individual lesson. If one accepts the indicators, then self will use them to notify one of their position in the lesson and clues in navigating the lesson. This is a simple numeric code and one must know the meaning of the numbers. They come as sequences of numbers that one sees around them in their life. 111, 1111, 101, 121, 131, 141, 1001, etc. indicates that a lesson to be learned is available. 222 or the similar variations above indicate, upon acceptance of the lesson indicated by the 111, that the lesson awaits setup in the life experience to ensure continuity. Sometimes people and things must be positioned to make the lesson meaningful, and time is required for that to happen. That setup may not be needed, and one may get other numbers with the 222. 333 indicates yes or you are seeing a positive example. 444 indicates no or you are seeing a negative example or what not to do. 555 indicates that the lesson is a mastery lesson and the successful completion will mean a significant change in one's life when learned. Expect the lesson to be significantly difficult with more stress and more difficulty in navigating. 666 indicates that the lesson deals in the carnal or physical realm, outer. 777 indicates that the lesson deals in the spiritual realm, inner. 888 indicates the lesson is complete and all that occurred between the 111 and the 888 contains all the lesson elements, and confine your attention to what happened between the 111 and the 888. 999 means that the lesson, its purpose and meaning was learned to completion. 111 begins the new lesson cycle. One cannot miss the numbers. Notification will be made through the control of attention. The duration of the lesson could range from hours to months depending on the complexity. The lessons tend to get longer as lessons are learned. This is only a simple example and one can begin to develop more symbols and signs if one who sees a symbol several times simply asks to know what it means and expects that answer to be shown to them through their life experience. There are often rest periods between the end of one lesson and the beginning of another. Regaining sanity. Natural law and responsibility is the only means to alleviate both the insanity and the confusion that causes this insanity. It is because On enforces natural law and On will not force anything against your will. And I already know what you are thinking. Yeah, right. For an understanding of natural law, we must begin with the components of what you truly are. We are consciousness, and consciousness itself is split into two components. We are an individual compartmentalized observational facet of on your life is on experiencing consciousness through a limited tool. It is not possible for on to fully be expressed through one flesh suit. It would take more life than the universe can hold. We each do our job to capture specific experiences for on. Ego is the physical expression of this limited facet of on. It is the perceived universe simulation you find yourself in. It is duality or the illusion of others. It is all your thoughts, all your feelings, all actions, and all events. Even the perception of time and volume is merely ego. The interface for this aspect is the left brain. In the repression process, ego's other function, ego acts is as a defense mechanism. The ego represses or hides uncomfortable experience to protect that which observers from the harshness of it. These memories often become buried under others. The ego refuses to even remember the existence of experiential memories and renders them invisible to the observer. Thus, the observer is unable to process the negative life experiences for the positive purposes for which they were intended unmanifested by the self. The apparent paradox of ego, serving as both the inflictor of pain and protector, is solved by realizing that the ego has no real, substantive existence of its own. The past is a construct of learned patterns. There is nothing real to protect, as there is no real enemy and no real death. Thus, ego places its own survival at the highest priority, for the discovery of the benign nature of existence would strip it of its power and potentially its function, and through a multiplicity of projected enemies. Ego is capable of projecting very intense, realistic hell experiences for the observer for learning purposes. Self, mentioned before, is the spiritual or energetic aspect or construct of our consciousness. Self is unity or oneness. Where ego has an identity and a quantity in the universe, the self is the part of us that is outside of the physical. It lives through the right brain. It governs the inspirational conduit through which our consciousness gains access to the mind of on through self. All reason is known when it is needed by ego, not when it is wanted by ego. Ego communicates in labels or definition that requires physicality to exist. Self communicates in symbols that have meaning and purpose that transcends the physical. It is helpful to look at it as like a video game where one side sets up the game that the other is playing. The ego lacks the senses or logic to cognitively understand or detect the self. Our challenges have to do with the age we are in. On created this duality and then disconnected us from the self to experience what it feels like to be separated from on. It was also useful to experience what it is like to have a beginning and an end. That does not exist in unity. In self, we are one in eternity. This requires a rather limited sense of time. This is the Iron Age, and the ancients knew we would enter this period of extreme left-brained ego. This, however, is changing. This is why you are here right now. We put ourselves to sleep or played a practical joke on ourselves, and now it is time to wake up and reveal the hidden camera. All is cyclical. When you look in the mirror, all that you see and experience, in the physical, is ego. On is the observer indicated by quantum mechanics, not the ego. The ego does the intending, but the ego does not control the game, and it is not what collapses the life waveform into a particle we know of as now. Self is the element determining the position and timing of the resultant particle. The quantum physicist looks in the mirror and thinks the image is the observer. So, therefore, ego fools itself into thinking that it is what is controlling, when really, ego is merely the actor, and the director or self tells the actor, ego, what to do. This is the error that causes the primary failure in the law of attraction teachings. Another primary quantum effect is that, it has been measured that often effects precede their cause. This is important as this is the primary mechanism that allows the ego to think that it is in control. The will to do something is projected in ego's time illusion such that the will appears to precede the action. This makes ego an excellent tool for learning, as all things appear spontaneous when actually they are under the strict control of self in complete safety. Natural law is the means by which all things occur and is structured to provide this lesson. The reason I bring this up is that the ego will compromise endlessly to maintain the illusion of it being in control. At this time people are throwing off the existing rules in large numbers and ego is panicking and keeping pace, maintaining the illusions as that is one of its primary functions. It is the deceiver, the illusionist, and allows us to exist in apparent separateness. Our lesson required a subtle change from the last age to allow us to explore and learn within this new paradigm. We lacked useful knowledge of what insanity is. This effectively removed the primary barrier to suffering, because when one has a useful knowledge of insanity, then they can avoid suffering. We are affirming principles in natural law using established precedent or a verdict employing trial by combat. When either method is used, someone suffers. To know the effect of going wrong, someone is required to go first and take one for the team. Our insanity is so deep that often we are required to do it over and over, and each time expecting a different result. Natural law is consistent. A more useful definition of insanity is the inability to perceive the truth. In truth I mean if we have this specific blinder, then we do not know that what we are about to do will either produce benefit or it will produce suffering. If we pay attention and accept the suffering as necessary and our responsibility for any action that produces suffering, then we will be able to learn the lesson that suffering teaches and avoid it. If we do not pay attention to what occurs or do not accept what we see, the truth, or we do not take responsibility for our actions, then we get the lesson again and the suffering is increased. Increased consciousness is increased attention, increased acceptance and increased responsibility, and this permits the learning of lessons without the negative reinforcement of significant suffering. The primary elements of insanity are: 1. Indulgence of fiction and giving that which exists only in our mind's power. 2. A lack of constructive responsibility in that we fail to respond, unresponsive, or our response is not appropriate, irresponsibility. 3. Disconnection from unity. 4. Ignorance of natural law. You cannot master insanity without first experiencing insanity. It is an illusion that hurts like hell. You need to forgive yourself for being insane because this was your objective and it is necessary. Cut yourself some slack. If you can't forgive yourself, then none of the perceived others in your experience can forgive you either. It is up to you. No need to keep score. If you think your life is a race or a fashion show, then you are merely distracting yourself from your own confusion. Lack of responsibility is the key to the deprivation of rights. The insane have no rights because the exercise of rights requires responsibility. The insane are incompetent and the sane have a responsibility to care and treat the insane. Courts and governments presume us in our base state as being insane, without a sense of responsibility and without rights unless we can demonstrate we are not insane. The trouble is we continue to believe fiction is real. We are ignorant of the natural law, and we do not know how we do this to ourselves. Therefore, the world has become an insane asylum where the insane are treated by others who are themselves insane. The final attempt to remedy our insanity will be that we will be tortured until we either snap out of it or we die. Look around and welcome to the modern age. One must truly want their state to change before they can even learn the natural law pertaining to contracts. One must be willing to take responsibility for their lives before they even require the law. The insane are lawless by design. For me, the study of natural law contract was pivotal, as in order to enter into contract one must be competent and therefore responsible. The contract itself contains many of the elements, as you will see later. The means of communicating the process of escape. Left brain/ego communicates in written and spoken words, and this is why descriptions about existing in right brain/self are difficult, because we lack the language to describe it. In reality, the lack of context requires one to describe the right brain paradigm not as what it is, but rather what it is not. Similarly, to enter the right paradigm one does not do something, think something or feel something, rather it requires non-doing, non-thinking and non-feeling. This is a passive act of repression by the ego. To say it another way, you cannot find the door out. You must stop and wait for the door to find you. Another way to understand it is that the self produces the egoic structure of the door and a left brain key. It takes a self to turn the key and open the door. Once outside the door, The key and the door are meaningless. The left brain paradigm is as a room, a containment that one leaves rather than the transition being an entering into anything. Since the ego hates not being in control, calming it to a point where one is able to practice the appropriate non-action is usually quite difficult, if not impossible. Life or reality can be looked at as a movie. We become so identified with the actor on the screen we jump when the monster appears. When we jump, we realize we are sitting in the seat eating popcorn. It takes a jolt. Law of attraction says the actor is what controls the action through intention. It is actually the writer and director of the movie, self, that controls the action for the benefit of the observer in the audience. The actor is just the puppet in a puppet show. The law. First, there can be no true enlightenment and transcendent perception without knowing the law. Again, there can be no true enlightenment and transcendent perception without knowing the law. Just in case you did not get that. There can be no true enlightenment and transcendent perception without knowing the law. The process of bringing balance between ego and self is done through an application of natural law. I did not even know where to start, so I read the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. It was said that it was based on biblical law, and I wanted to see if that was the case. After reading these documents I was even more confused. It seemed pretty straightforward, but if they were the law of the land, then what is all this stupid stuff going on that had no reference in these documents? I went to the Bible to see if I could make sense of it. I had a basic hurdle I needed to overcome first, and this came from a study of what we know of as the Ten Commandments and what the big deal was about them. I had my dalliance with religion, and that was a brick wall, as I noticed that religion does not often understand the book it is so preoccupied with. I looked at the first commandment to see if I was violating it. Have no other gods before me. People told me that was the establishment of monotheism, but for me, it was important to understand why a supreme being would have to tolerate competition. Why not just bag them and be done with it? In understanding what is being referred to as gods, a god is any man, woman, object and even mental construct that is not on truth. When we give mental power to a fiction over us, then on gives it real power over us by honoring our will. Wait a minute. Did that mean it was my choice? I did it? It was my responsibility and it was just my own stupidity? Yup. I became very interested in things that I do that with. This led to another important aspect of law. If you ask permission, it is assumed in law that you need permission. I needed to cut that out immediately. Soon I began discovering, almost magically, all the fictions I gave power over me. As soon as I realized it, they lost power. This led to a study of what sovereignty was and how it related to responsibility, rights, and the law of contracts. Later I would discover that much of my interaction in the universe was by contract, and I did not have a constructive definition of what a natural law contract is or how a contract manifests power and force in physicality. Once I had a useful definition of a natural law contract, I used my knowledge of contract to force a balance between self and ego. At the end of this document is the procedure that you will be led through to bring about this change. The consistent attenuation of the ego leads to a permanent change in the way one perceives reality that will permit anyone to exist in a continual state of freedom and protection. Existing perceptual models do not allow for this state, and worse, actively hinder people from attaining it, through the continual meddling of the ego in the perceptual filtering process. Right now, natural law applies in the universe we perceive as reality. Reality is what is real. If fiction is real to me, then I can begin to see the problem I was facing. If I talked with the Easter Bunny every day, I would not trust me with anything important either. There are a number of different models of reality in general use today that curiously place us in a position of being at the mercy of an accidental universe and make us out to be slaves to the will of a supposed majority or a criminal elite. For instance, The idea that we have absolute potent free will tends to remove purpose and meaning from our lives as we decide that all things are manifest by our will. If we/ego has no purpose to what we/ego do, then who does? Strangely, the idea of rigid fate tends to have the same effect. If one takes any sampling along the spectrum between absolute potent free will and completely scripted fate, then one misses the third option, in that reality is produced for the benefit of the observer, by proxy, such that it is continuous and tailored around the observer, and when the observer needs it for whatever they are here to learn and experience, the fate/free will paradigm affords no protection from the majority or elite and little in the way of peace of mind or freedom. I have tested both these models, and they seem to intentionally hide important truths from us. How can we employ a tool that has been purposefully hidden from us? Frankly, we cannot, so it is up to us to find these tools before we can employ them. This will require a rethinking of where we believe we are, what we believe we are, and why we believe we are here. The objective is to come to a knowledge of what we are, knowing where we are, and knowing why we are here with a degree of certainty. No popular methodology can bring us to that objective, as it is up to us to go in a different direction. The nature of the contract. First, one must understand that we exist with the unlimited right to make a contract. It is an essential part of us, and that does mean unlimited. This right can be exercised in any direction and to any perceived end. Most often, we as a species have contracted with ego to provide us with its illusion of potent free will, being in charge of our own lives, in exchange for our blind obedience to its whims. This blindness extends to our near certainty that our ego is, in fact, our own true self. One has no reason to commune with you if you are not responsible for yourself. Sovereignty is granted by one, and when you willingly choose to receive it, you will always receive tangible, convincing notification because you need to know when it happens. Sovereignty includes the responsibility of one's body and comes with rights, and more importantly, responsibility for one's conduct. Because of sovereignty's reciprocal nature, it is granted through contract. The granting of sovereignty must be willingly asked for, as the granting authority, on, will not force the contract into existence that instantiates one's sovereignty or presume a willingness by you where it has not been overtly expressed. When one creates a perceived victim by consequences resulting from an act, power is marshaled against the perceived perpetrator, by on, to make the victim whole at the perceived perpetrator's expense. This is the source of negative consequences in our lives. This can be particularly uncomfortable for those who make perceived victims of themselves. This principle permeates every level of our lives. Sovereignty will not be granted if you do not know the law required to protect your sovereignty. Lessons in natural law come first. The natural law of contract. All real enforceable contracts contain all the four following elements. Enforceable means power will be used in the contract's execution and binding you or others to terms and conditions. If a supposed contract is lacking one or more of these, it is not enforced by on unless you are ignorant. A natural law contract must contain 1. An offer. One has to first solicit or present a deal. 2. An acceptance. Another has to accept the offer or deal. 3. An exchange of real consideration. One does something if another does something or gives something for something. Fiction does not count as real, and that is not to be forgotten. This has been the key to governmental, religious and economic enslavement. The perpetrators cannot really do this in natural law without uncomfortable consequences, so they create a fictional entity or a fiction of law that can. The problem is that we are confused and think these fictions, in the minds of men, are real and have real power over us. Ouch. 4. A meeting of the minds. A contract must be between two minds. A piece of paper is only documentation and by itself is not a contract, even though it may say that it is. One has a mind and therefore has the power to enter into a contract and manifests the power of enforcement. Fictions of law do not have a mind. Real enforcement of natural law contract is administered as follows. 1. All contracts are verbal. 2. Your word is your bond. Break your word and it is a shackle. Test it. 3. All contracts are voluntary. You cannot be forced into a contract. A forced agreement will be ignored by on, and no power will be marshaled to enforce the terms. You cannot be compelled to relinquish your rights but can, through confusion, trick yourself into voluntarily relinquishing your rights, i.e. enslave yourself. Conveniently, we are not taught this. 4. All contracts are buyer beware. You are responsible for knowing what you are getting yourself into. You must have reasonable means of discovering the terms of the contract. This is another way that we lose to our ignorance. They seldom tell us what the terms are, and we seldom ask. 5. Under law, if you behave as if a contract is in force, then it is presumed, even by on, that a contract indeed exists. If you act like you are bound to a contract, on recognizes the situation as if you are bound to a contract. It does not mean an actual contract is in force. It means that it appears just like a contract is in force because you do not know any better. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and looks like a duck, then it is a duck. Our remedy is education. Other important natural law principles. The created is never more powerful than its creator. On creates the conscious you. On is more powerful than you. You create fiction. You are more powerful than fiction. Ignorance of the natural law is no excuse. If you know on, then you know the law. Clue alert. Say it slowly. Ignorance. Those who are not in possession of all their faculties or have turned away from on are, under natural law, judged by courts as incompetent and subject to the prevailing lawful authority. To implement the Holy Grail contract after the time on notifies you of your sovereignty, you are free to make a contract with on by speaking the following: I will trust you without condition, if you remove from me my ability to create a victim. The process of ego attenuation and rebalancing, enlightenment. The level of your trust in on determines the number of steps in the process, and how quickly they are implemented. It is entirely personal and depends on where you are within your life experience and the strength of ego. It is difficult for narcissists, and this is why many are conditioned to express narcissistic tendencies. It is a means of making one's escape more challenging. If it was not a challenge, then why do it? The narcissist ego will look for any alternative to retain its perceived grip on potent free will. And this is the allure for ego-based enlightenment processes. Those are the methods that are based on doing something, like meditation, yoga and martial arts. The progression of the process will first be described in the way that the typical man or woman might experience it. Often we approach this with a rather low level of trust, a low pain threshold, much doubt, and much fear. It is the process itself that slowly increases trust, increases our ability to endure pain, reduces our doubt and allows us to overcome our fears in a slow, comfortable progression that we are able to deal with incrementally. The process requires an interaction with those that have gone before, and its reinforcement requires the assistance of others entering the process after, such that the principles are cemented through the teacher/student process, where one is both the teacher and student simultaneously. This creates an increase in human connections and interactions, which maintains a continual geometric growth curve. Step 1. Actually, the contractual offer for sovereignty was made by you long ago, but knowing that it was possible for you to even accept that sovereignty is another matter. The fact that you are being exposed to this truth right now means that you are in the proper position. We had lessons to learn within this particular age, so this process was revealed to a few people over the centuries here and there as it was necessary and served a purpose. Your willingness is a hurdle you will need to work through in some cases. So in order to start the process, you need to simply choose in your mind to accept the offer. If one would like to see if this is for real and have some confirmation that this is indeed a deliberate learning process, one need only ask for confirmation of the truth, and on will provide it as necessary. But pay close attention. You should be able to tell when sovereignty is granted, as it feels like a weight is lifted off of you. You may laugh or cry with happiness, and a warm feeling may wash over you. Sometimes it is accompanied with a misty fog-like experience. Either way, you will know with certainty. Step 2. After the sovereignty contract is accepted, a series of different processes begin, in no particular order, as it depends on your particular needs. Many have difficulties being able to trust something they cannot see, so it becomes necessary to create a series of life experiences that demonstrates to you that there is indeed something intelligent working behind the scenes. These may manifest as odd coincidences, vivid dreams with clear messages, and events in your daily life that are so improbable that it causes you to notice them. Synchronicities. These could be expressed in seeing sequences of numbers like 1111, for example. The imagery will be in the form that makes sense to you personally. Often when the sovereignty contract is accepted, you begin experiencing a stream of past memories and images of events that occurred in your past. If you are not paying attention, these images continue to play, over and over, until you do pay attention and accept the event as valuable to you. This can keep you up all night if you do not know what is happening. The key is to recognize why the image, concept or event is important. What is the purpose of it happening, or why it is being shown to you? There is always a reason for everything. You must figure it out. If you are stuck, then you must ask for more clarification, and then it will probably be demonstrated in dreams or in real life through real-life experiences. This is where interactions become important, as you can share your event with another who is able to look at it objectively without perverting the event with a personal bias. This process of solving the element that is brought to your conscious attention repeats over and over until all purpose is determined for all meaningful events in your life. It starts out simple with curious questions about one's life being answered. Then the process moves to reveal the nature of more uncomfortable events. A key objective of the process is to slowly develop trust in the process, and especially on, and then developing more courage to deal with more and more uncomfortable dark life content. Things will be revealed to you that you were afraid to remember before because you have new courage to process the experience. It is a deliberate process that moves you through your history at the most comfortable pace. However, it must be recognized that there is a reason you did not face these uncomfortable memories and events in the first place. They can be frightening even when the process proceeds properly. It helps to know that it is important, necessary, will lead to a removal of the emotional stigma, and is being done so that you are protected from all perceived harm. The contract is a vehicle for change. Once you go through the process, you will know what truly happened. You allowed yourself to wake up and be responsible. The contract is a physical cheat or a mechanism to help you do this. You have high standards, and you won't allow it until you know you are ready. Natural law will then be an inherent aspect of your experience, as all responsible people know the law. This may help you to see what you did. You are a limitless singular being of immense power. You tricked yourself to get here, and it requires you to realize the nature of the trick and express willingness to undo the trick. This is what you achieved. You created a specially designed, intricate and complex cage that set up limits and boundaries, leaving one very narrow door out that is camouflaged from the inside. Your consciousness stepped inside your cage, leaving most of you outside. You closed the door. You concealed the knowledge of both the door and the cage itself from yourself unless you followed a specific process to reveal the door. Then you concealed the process from yourself. You have no other choice but to ask yourself for help. Let's look at the Holy Grail contract and see why it works. I will trust you without condition if you remove from me the ability to create a victim. The pronouns I, me and you are an ego illusion inside the cage. Outside the cage, they all refer to one singular being. A victim or a perpetrator only exists as an ego illusion inside the cage. Outside the cage, it is just one being learning its own nature. You made a contract with yourself by willingly stepping into the cage. That in itself is an ego illusion, as a one-party contract cannot actually exist either in unity or duality. It is fiction. More accurately, you simply decided and did it. No harm, no foul. Being in the cage, the ego itself produces the ego illusion of self-victimization, which also cannot exist either in duality or unity. It is fiction. When you accept the contract, you cannot remain entirely in the cage because you have to step outside to honor the contract, because unity is where there are no victims. The contract exists in perpetuity because for you to not trust without condition would create a victim as you would be in breach of contract, and that is specifically prohibited when you accept the contract in the first place. Did this help?